YouTube, one of the more discussed topics in the NBA community as of late has been the regular season of the NBA, just in general, right? A lot of people, there are two sides to this issue. I see mainly one side, and I might have to take the unpopular side here, but the question is for this video, does the NBA regular season matter? There's a lot of people I see throughout the NBA community, and this is an argument a lot of people use against the NBA community, people that don't like basketball, don't like the NBA. They say the NBA regular season is meaningless, it doesn't matter, there's too many games, players don't try that hard in the regular season. The playoffs is when it really counts. That's when they start watching. And like I said, this is a pretty hot button issue as far as, the NBA community goes. So I want to, dive headfirst into it, give my opinion on it, address a lot of the takes on both sides. And maybe you guys can, let me know down in the comment section what you think about this issue, because I'm sure going to give my opinion. So definitely let me know, does the NBA regular season matter? Let's talk about it, folks. So I'm just going to give my take on the issue right off the bat here. I actually think the NBA regular season happens to matter a lot. And, every single game out of the 82 game season matters quite a bit. I'm going to explain why in this video, but I know, just being on Twitter and YouTube, that is about as unpopular a take as you can have. Maybe not so much within, the hardcore NBA community, but everyone I talk to in my life seems to think that I am wrong and, I'm crazy for thinking that. Let's jump into the reasons a lot of people give or them thinking the NBA regular season doesn't matter. And I'll start off with a pretty simple and common one, and that is the NBA season is too long, right? 82 games is too many. You see a lot of people saying this. They say, you really risk a lot of injuries for the big time players for the playoffs with an 82 game season. It's hard to care about, a really great team going up against a really bad team all the time. And, a good example would be like, why would I watch the Celtics play the Detroit Pistons in 2024? That game to me, is meaningless. I'm not saying that myself. I'm saying that's the argument people give. And while I can see where a lot of people are coming from with that, obviously the longer a season you have, the more injuries you risk for the superstars. And, as we know, the superstars are the key to the playoffs, and that's when things really start ramping up. But is the NBA season too long, right? Are 82 games too many? Does it drag on longer than it should? Because I think a lot of people just get bored by, midway through the season or around the All-Star break. And, my response to that would be, for one, I'm just going to say it. I think the 82 game schedule is pretty flawless. I think that's the almost perfect amount of games for an NBA regular season. And here's why. For one, the level of competition for every single team in the NBA and the parity around the league that you see in 2024, it's greater and higher than it's ever been in NBA history. So honestly, for an entertainment value, you have the Detroit Pistons, who are, like I said, not obviously a very great team this season, being the worst record in the league, but every single team, including the Detroit Pistons, the Charlotte Hornets, the San Antonio Spurs, the Portland Trail Blazers, they all have players that you would definitely want to watch. You could think of Victor Wembanyama, you could think of LaMelo Ball, you could think of Cade Cunningham, right? So just for the entertainment value, I think, these people, think that there are too many games because of, they don't want to watch good teams beat up on bad teams. I think that's kind of nonsense because, like I said, the entertainment value is still there with every single team, and the parity across the league is a lot higher than people think. And, number two, like I said, with the level of competition, this makes seeding incredibly important for the playoffs, maybe more important than ever, because with the talent gap from team to team being smaller than it's ever been, in my opinion, you have a lot of teams near the bottom of the conference fighting for the playoffs, making every single game important for seeding, right? I mean, last year alone in 2023, we saw two teams from the play-in tournament, so two teams below the 6th seed, make the conference finals in both conferences, right? And that was the Lakers and the Heat. The Heat ended up making it all the way to the finals as a play-in tournament team, and the Lakers making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, where, in that case, down the stretch of that season after the All-Star break for the Lakers and after the trade deadline, basically from February on, they were fighting every single game to make that play-in spot, right? So that, last stretch of the season for the Lakers, who ended up making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals in 2023, every single one of those games mattered, right? So like, how can we say that regular season games don't matter, right? Like, when seeding is more important than it's ever been in both conferences, which, as we know, seeding can sometimes come down to the last game of the season, right? So every single game is very important for playoff arrangements and brackets and stuff like that. You can really avoid a lot of bad matchups if you get a higher seed in the playoffs. I think about the New York Knicks this season snagging the 2 seed towards the end of the season through their final games, which basically guaranteed that they would avoid the Celtics until the conference finals. Now, that didn't actually happen. They didn't get to the conference finals, but them getting the 2 seed really gave them a better chance than it would if they were the 3 seed, right? So seeding is more important than ever because of the competition between each team, right? The gap between team to team a lot of times isn't as large as it has been in the past, and that's why I think every game matters for playoff seeding, right? So obviously 82 games is a really, really big deal when the more games you have, the more games you have that are going to be important. So another, rebuttal I'd have to the season being too long, and this is, I think, the best one that you could give, is for those who say the season is too long, let me tell you something, all right? The regular season in the NBA is supposed to be a grind, right? It's not supposed supposed to be some quick thing that gets us to the playoffs, right? I think a lot of people look at it the wrong way. You know, it's not supposed to be necessarily that way. I think it's supposed to be a long grind. And the reason for that is a good one. And that is how good teams separate themselves in the NBA from great teams, right? And good teams from bad teams, right? A bad team might be able to steal a couple games here and there, but over a long stretch and long period of time, it is harder for them to maintain success, right? You think a lot about how when the regular season starts, a lot of teams get off to the races, right? And they come out strong and they end up winning, like, you know, they go like 10-3 in their first 13 or so, and then they fall all the way to the 8th seed, right? This year it happened to the Orlando Magic. The Cavaliers had a stretch where they were, you know, close to the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and by the end of the year, because it's such a long grind and because the long grind of the season makes you have to withstand so much adversity throughout an NBA season, you end up falling where you're supposed to, right? You end up getting the seed that you're supposed to get based on your talent level and, you know, play throughout the season. And I think that's the kind of, you know, season and fairness we want as NBA fans, right? If the season was 60 games or 41 games, half the season is what a lot of people say, you know, 41 games it should be, the seedings would not fall where they're supposed to, right? And a lot of teams would miss the playoffs that are gonna make it, and a lot of teams would make it that were supposed to miss it, right? And then we wouldn't get the best result in the playoffs. The 82 game season separates good teams from great teams and non-playoff teams from playoff teams. And the greatness of an NBA championship team or a top of the conference type of team isn't their ability to, you know, beat one team any given night. It is their ability to withstand the long grind that is the NBA season, that is the 82 game season, battle every single piece of adversity throughout an 82 game season and still come out the best. That's what makes a great team great, in my opinion. And that's what the regular season allows for, right? Having it be 82 games. So another point of this would be there's a reason you see a lot of teams that make the finals and win the finals have their best players be young and spry, right? If you look at the finals throughout the last few years, you know, maybe other than the Warriors and the Lakers, you know, within the last 5 years or so, the best player on the championship teams on, you know, both conferences is usually below the age of 33. And that is because a long grind season and a long grind playoff or series, basically 16 games if you can win them all, it just favors the younger players, right? It favors the team that is most spry and strong and at their biggest strength to be able to enter the playoffs at full strength, right? That's why a lot of older teams like the Phoenix Suns, the LA Lakers, teams, you know, the Clippers, that's why they kind of phase out throughout the playoffs and the regular season, is because they don't go into the playoffs at full strength. The long grind wears older players down, and otherwise, if the season wasn't 82 games, you'd see a lot of 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds in the finals every year, because it would just be about, you know, surviving the regular season, which would be 40 or 60 games in this regard, and then they'd be at full strength for the playoffs, right? There's a reason that we don't see a lot of 45 and 50-year-old players in the NBA ever, and that is not because a lot of 40-year-old and 50-year-old great players don't still have the talent to be able to compete with NBA players, because they do. A lot of these 40-year-old and 50-year-old guys are in shape and skilled enough to be able to compete in the NBA, but not for an 82 game season, man. That where your body just can't handle it at that point, and that's why these guys get phased out of the league. It's not because of the skill. You don't just lose all your skill, right? You might lose some athleticism, but a lot of guys can still, you know, hang around with a lot of these younger guys at that age, and the reason they aren't able to and have to retire is because they can do it, but just not for 82 games, right? And not for a, you know, 4 playoff series stretch. So that is why the season needs to be as long as it is. It's not just for ticket sales. It's not, you know, there are reasons for it, right? So that is the first point I want to mention. A lot of people say that in the regular season, you know, the players don't try as hard. They go about 75% on defense, and that's being generous, right? I do agree that players try less hard over the regular season, and that is an issue, right? That is one that I do think has some merit to it. When you shorten the season, the players will try harder because the games mean more individually, even though I just, you know, kind of laid out how each game is still important in an 82 game season. But I think a lot of fans want it to be like the 2000s and the 90s, where, you know, every player gives everything they have to every possession, every game, every preseason game, every, you know, full court press in game 25 of the NBA regular season. That's just not realistic, right? People just think that, you know, the players just don't try in the regular season. They're kind of just going through the motions, and that might be true for some players, but I don't know if you guys watched the playoffs, but like that still happens in the playoffs, man. There's a lot of people not getting back on defense. There's a lot of people not going up for rebounds. There's a lot of people not going up for a block, not challenging, you know, a guy driving to the basket. While I do think that does make for a less good NBA and less good product and isn't what you want to see all the time, I just don't think that that's something that only happens in the regular season. It still happens in the playoffs. I guarantee you your favorite team does it in the playoffs too. That's more of an effort issue. I don't see that as being a regular season issue. It still happens, maybe on a less scale, right? And maybe players turning it off and on throughout the playoffs and throughout stretches of games. Maybe down in the final 2 minutes of the game, they'll turn it on and play as hard as they, you know, possibly can throughout that stretch. That still happens all the time in the playoffs. I don't think that's something that's exclusive to the regular season, but I do think that is a valid concern of fans of the NBA. I also think that something that plays into that is just how fast and spread out the NBA offense is nowadays, and players not hustling on defense has a lot to do with it. Just you have to cover more ground on defense than you ever did before, and you have to give a lot more effort on defense than you would in the 90s. I mean athletically, or the early 2000s. I mean athletically, not, you know, mentality or effort wise. I just mean you have to cover a lot more space as a defender nowadays than you used to. You know, people are running all the way around the 3-point line, pin down screens. The NBA offense is just so much more spread out and different that you are constantly running and in motion if you are a defender that tries as hard as he can on every possession. So you relegate that to a couple guys on your, you know, floor at any given time. These are defensive first type of players, right? It's really hard to do both of those things offensively and defensively for a full, you know, 82 game season in playoffs nowadays, because the body just isn't made for it, right? You eventually just wear down and get tired no matter what your age is, right? There's just so much more violent cuts and running nowadays. So that's, you know, something I think that could play into it. People say that the playoffs are a different animal and you know, basically a different sport almost than the regular season. And I do think that that is probably the biggest reason why people don't watch the regular season, is that some players like Joel Embiid, James Harden, Rudy Gobert are absolutely dominant in the regular season. And once the playoffs start and once teams start game planning and strategizing for them pre-game and really picking apart and exposing their weaknesses, they become, you know, really different players and aren't able to maintain that success, because overall the playoffs are just a different, fundamentally different game of basketball because of the strategy element that goes into each playoff game that every team can employ. I agree that this is a real thing. I do agree that the playoff atmosphere and playoff environment and just the way, like I said, teams employ their strategies and schemes more in the playoffs, they save a lot of their stuff for the playoffs. I do absolutely think that that is an issue that does make the NBA regular season a little bit less exciting maybe, and maybe you don't take it as seriously because you just know how the playoffs are going to be different. So it's like, how can I take this different game seriously when I know in a few months this is not going to be the result we're getting in the regular season, right? With certain players like Embiid, right? I hear you on that, because I also struggle with that as a Sixers fan. I you know, get hyped during the regular season and then I know, well, he's not going to be able to do it in the playoffs, right? They're not going to be able to do it in the playoffs. So I hear you on that. I definitely agree that that is something that makes the regular season a little bit less serious maybe from time to time, but I also think that is something that happens in every other sport as well. Not only does it happen in a lot of other sports, this is something that's always happened in NBA history, right? You know, this isn't something new to the 2020s or the 2010s, right? A lot of players throughout NBA history have gone through this. Wilt Chamberlain has gone through this. Karl Malone has gone through this. A lot of players that are dominant regular season players just couldn't get it done in the playoffs because the floor shrinks, right? The floor shrinks and the pressure rises, and some players are just not as equipped to handle that as other great players, right? But does that mean we should write off the, you know, regular season entirely and say it's meaningless and doesn't matter? I don't think so at all. I mean, one of the things I want to talk about last in this video, it's the last point I'll make, is chemistry, right? Since the NBA is always in motion and the game is constantly changing and evolving from day to day, basically, chemistry and fit, which is one of the more important things as, you know, a roster, having chemistry and fit, making sure all the pieces fit together. A bad fit is noticeable instantly and you can spot it in a second. A good fit will take time to build up. And that's why I think the regular season is partly so important, because you think about the greatest team chemistry in all of basketball history, and that is probably the San Antonio Spurs dynasty. Do you think the Spurs just got that chemistry overnight? A more recent example is the Denver Nuggets. Do you think the Nuggets just built that type of synergy and energy and team cohesion overnight? No, it took a lot of years of an 82 game season. You need years of reps, team bonding, opportunities, different types of defenses to face, and you have to build those things up throughout the years for a long stretch of time to be able to get to where the Nuggets were last year with the chemistry and this year with the chemistry. You know, basketball is a game, maybe more than any other sport, like I said, that is so fit and chemistry driven that talent just doesn't fix those things, right? And so an 82 game season really allows those things to be worked out throughout this season. You know, you can really work out your issues and kinks throughout your team with an 82 game season. And that's how players and teams go into the playoffs so strong and so together and so cohesive, is because they have all those reps and practices that they take seriously throughout the regular season. Some teams take them more seriously than others, and that's how you get a Denver Nuggets, and that's how you get maybe a team that underachieves, right? But at the end of the day, having the opportunities over 82 games to be able to face all those different matchups and defenses and see all these different things on the court, there is nothing greater to prepare you for the playoffs than that, right? And if you lessen the amount of games, if you don't take it as seriously, you won't get a great result like you have in the playoffs, and championships won't mean as much at the end of the day, you know? Part of the reason a champion feels so great at the end of the day when he's holding the trophy or the team's holding the trophy is because of the long journey they've got to get there, right? Think about how tedious and and, you know, tiring and exhausting that 82 game grind is. And then once you finally get to the mountaintop, that's why it feels so great, right? You can't, like, if it was only half as long, championships wouldn't feel so impactful. You know, another thing is like the off season, right? Like the NFL has OTAs, right? And summer mini camp and training camp and then film study, and then basically a 5 or 4 month period where they're just sitting all together as a team, planning out, scheming out, finding out what works, what doesn't, finding, sifting through the guys that are going to play, that aren't going to play, figuring out their identity, their style, taking it to the preseason where you have 4 games to do that. So a month or longer to get some real meaningful reps in that regard. And then all that combined allows you to integrate the new pieces of the roster into the team and have the guys that have been there before gel together with them, right? Because we all know from year to year, the NFL and the NBA, the roster has changed so much. So you have to have that, off-season period, right? The NBA doesn't have that. The NBA has the shortest off-season in all of sports, right? In America, at least, and from what I understand. And so you don't have a long period of time to work all these things out. You have to do it throughout the season on the fly, right? The NBA is constantly in motion. Basketball is always changing and evolving, and you have to do it throughout a season. And that's why it's so meaningful, in my opinion, because like I said, that's how you get a Denver Nuggets. That's how you get a Boston Celtics team, right? Think about how much time it takes for all these teams to get to where they are. It's not for nothing that they get there. If you skate through the regular season, that might look like what they're doing, but they're not, I promise you. So in my opinion, I went on a long tangent. I hope that wasn't too crazy to follow or whatever. I can get off on a tangent sometimes. I'm pretty unorganized mentally a lot of times. So hopefully you guys can forgive me for that. And hopefully you guys stuck around because, I'm sure it was a lot to deal with. But make sure you guys drop a like on the video if you guys did enjoy it. Let me know down in the comments section if you agree with me, disagree with me. What do you think the consensus is of this on, all of the social medias and throughout the NBA community in general? In my opinion, most people think that the NBA regular season is way less important than I think it is. And I don't know, I just wanted to talk about that today. So let me know if you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. This is a place where you can express any opinion you have as long as it's not disrespectful to someone else. So definitely let me know what you guys are thinking or feeling about this topic, and I will catch you guys in the next one, man. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video, because we upload videos just like this every single day on the channel, and I wouldn't want you guys to miss any more of them. So make sure you guys subscribe, man. We're really passionate basketball fans over here, and I'm just trying to share all my, trash takes with you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I will catch you guys on the next one. This is your boy D-Haven. As always, peace.